The arena was older than most stars, or so the legends claimed, carved into the heart of a barren world. It stretched wide and circular, tier upon tier of polished obsidian seats filled with beings from every corner of the galaxy. Their voices mingled into a storm of laughter, derision, and curiosity, for the day's spectacle was already infamous before it began. The galactic elites, those who measured power by fleets, weapons, and the champions they bred, had gathered to witness the humiliation of a species that had only recently crawled onto the interstellar stage. Humanity, to the elites, mankind was a curiosity at best, a fragile mistake at worst. They mocked humans as primitive scavengers who still clung to the ashes of wars fought with bullets and bombs, while the galaxy had long since ascended to plasma, antimatter, and quantum annihilation beams. When the announcement echoed to the Colosseum, representing Earth, a single combatant, the laughter swelled, mocking thunder rolling across the stands. From the gate emerged a human. He was not clad in shining armor or wrapped in nanofields. Instead, he wore weather fatigues, boots that had walked too many miles, and eyes that carried the stillness of someone who had seen too much. In his hands, he bore no glowing blade or humming cannon, but something that made the elites laugh so hard their jeweled bodies shook with mirth. A rifle, old, battered, scarred with rust and age, its wooden stock chipped, its barrel dull by time. An antique, dragged from a museum or unearthed from a forgotten battlefield, now standing against the galaxy's most perfected warrior. The laughter rolled on, sharp and merciless. A crystalline noble raised a glittering arm and scoffed. Is this a jest? That relic cannot fire against modern shields. A serpentine warlord coiled against the railing, tongue flicking with amusement. They bring a stick to the death circle. How human! Bets were shouted, wagers laid, all with the certainty that the match would be short and bloody. Then the opposite gate opened. From its shadows strode the champion of the elites, a creature sculpted through centuries of genetic mastery and mechanical augmentation. His armor gleamed like obsidian glass, etched with glowing runes that pulsed with internal energy. His frame towered, cords of muscle woven with steel filaments, every step a tremor. Across his back rested a blade longer than a man was tall, its edge vibrating at molecular precision, capable of slicing through hulls and armor alike. The crowd erupted in adoration, chanting his name like a hymn. He had never lost. He had never even struggled. The human looked at him once, then returned his gaze to the rifle. He ran a callous thumb along the stock, brushing away dust that might have been centuries old, with care bordering on reverence. He checked the bolt, adjusted the sight, and tapped the magazine as if to remind it of its duty. There was no fear in his movements, no panic or uncertainty. He acted as if he were alone in some quiet place, performing a ritual passed down through blood and memory. The champion sneered, his voice amplified across the arena. You insult me with this scrap of iron. Do you wish to die quickly? He raised a massive sword, its hum vibrating the air. The crowd cheered at his taunt, certain that this was nothing more than a prelude to a swift kill. But the human did not answer. He adjusted his stance, shifted his weight, and lifted the rifle to his shoulder. The wood creaked faintly. The metal clinked as the bolt slid with mechanical finality. To the elites, it was laughable. To him, it was sacred. Behind the calm of his eyes lingered stories the galaxy would never know. Trenches choked with smoke, nights where every sound promised death, years of battles fought with weapons no one else would bother to remember. His weapon was not a relic. It was continuity. It was trust forged over generations, a pact between man and machine that no alloyed blade or plasma cannon could replicate. The crowd's laughter began to thin, not because they believed in him, but because silence has a way of demanding respect, even when wrapped in absurdity. The human radiated an unsettling patience. Where the champion flexed, the human simply breathed. Where the elites mocked, he stood as though nothing in their laughter mattered. A hush spread across the lower tiers. One noble leaned closer to another and whispered, "Does he not realize? That weapon cannot pierce modern plating." The answer was quiet, uneasy. Then why does he look so certain? Inside the arena, the two opponents faced each other, separated by sand and expectation. One embodied the peak of galactic science. The other carried a weapon that should have been forgotten. Yet it was a human who exuded inevitability. as though he had already walked this path before, as though the outcome was carved not by technology, but by will. A horn sounded, deep and resonant, marking the beginning of the contest. The champion roared, lifting his blade high, and the crowd answered with feral cheers. The human only inhaled slowly, steadying himself, every motion measured, as though time itself bent to his rhythm. In that instant a shift occurred. For the first time, the laughter faltered. Somewhere deep within the crowd, buried beneath layers of mockery and arrogance, a seed of unease took root. What if the rusted rifle was not a joke? What if the human's calm was not ignorance, but confidence? The champion began his charge, armor glinting, sword glowing with lethal promise. The ground trembled beneath his weight. The Colosseum thundered with chants of victory. The elite certain the fight would end in moments. The human raised a rifle, cheek pressed to the worn stock, eyes narrowing as if he had all the time in the universe. He did not flinch at the advancing mountain of steel and flesh. He did not blink at the roar that sought to shake his resolve. He simply breathed once more, slow and deliberate, as the distance closed. And then the scene froze on the edge of inevitability, the crowd's mocking certainty colliding with silence heavy with possibility. The gates had opened. The players stood ready, and the galaxy leaned forward, waiting for the shot that would decide whether humanity's name would be buried in ridicule or etched into legend. The champion's charge thundered across the arena floor, every step a quake of metal-shod boots and rippling muscle beneath armored plating. The crowd roared with him, their voices rising to a frenzy of certainty. His blade shimmered, vibrating at a pitch that split the air with a sharp, metallic whine, promising annihilation in a single blow. Yet the human did not move. He stood rooted in place, the rifle pressed to his shoulder, his breath steady, his gaze locked through the iron sights. The distance between them collapsed in heartbeats. Sand sprayed with every stride of the champion, the air carrying the scent of ozone and oil from the pulsing weapon he carried. His grin widened, cruel and arrogant, sure of the spectacle he was about to deliver. To him, the human was prey, a fragile body that would scatter like broken glass beneath the weight of a true warrior. But to the man holding the rusted rifle, none of this mattered. His world narrowed until there was nothing left but breath, sight, and the squeeze of a trigger. The shot rang out. It was not the muted hiss of plasma or the whisper of energy beams. It was thunder, raw and violent, a sound from an age when wars were fought by those who looked their enemies in the eye. The crack reverberated through the arena, startling the crowd into silence. The sound carried memory within it, echoes of trenches, jungles, deserts, battlefields that had long since turned to dust. The bullet flew, a simple piece of lead wrapped in copper, spinning with a precision imparted by human hands a century ago. It met the champion mid-charge, slipping past shimmering fields of energy and reinforced alloy, as though they were nothing more than mist. The impact was small, almost delicate, just above the heart. For a heartbeat, the champion kept running, blade raised high, grin still fixed. Then his step faltered, his roar broke into a wet gasp. The sword slipped from his grasp, embedding itself into the sand with a hollow thud. He dropped to one knee, confusion dawning in his luminous eyes. He looked down at the smoking hole in his armor, no larger than a coin, as disbelief overtook fury. Blood seeped out in dark rivulets, staining the polished plates he had worn like a crown. Slowly, impossibly, he collapsed onto his side, the arena floor trembling with the weight of his fall. The silence that followed was heavier than any laughter had been. Thousands of beings sat frozen, their eyes locked on the impossible scene before them. The champion, undefeated across 100 battles, the pinnacle of galactic engineering, lay still in the sand. And across from him, the human lowered the rifle with practiced grace, sliding the bolt back. A single spent casing ejected, catching the arena lights for a fleeting instant before it clattered against the ground with a hollow chime. The sound was final. It carried the weight of truth. One shot, one kill. Gasps broke from the stands. The crystalline nobles leaned forward, their bodies refracting light in jittering confusion. The serpentine warlord who had mocked the loudest moments before now coiled in uneasy silence. Others whispered furiously, demanding explanation. How could such a primitive weapon pierce a shield designed to withstand artillery fire? How could a man of flesh outmatch a being sculpted by centuries of science? The human said nothing. He adjusted his grip, checked the chamber, and rested the rifle against his shoulder as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. His eyes were steady, untroubled by the corpse lying yards away. It was not triumph that defined his expression, but something quieter, respect perhaps, or the solemn weight of one more battle completed. A voice from the upper stands, shrill and incredulous, finally cut through the silence. This is trickery. Shields cannot fail to a metal slug. Others agreed, their outrage spilling into the air, but their protests only deepened the unease. No one could deny what they had seen. The champion had fallen, and the weapon that felled him had no place in their carefully ordered understanding of war. The human finally spoke, his voice carrying effortlessly across the hushed Colosseum. "Doesn't matter how shiny the weapon is," he said softly, almost conversationally. "What matters is the hand that wields it." His words struck harder than the bullet itself, a truth too simple for the elites to laugh away. For the first time, the galaxy's most powerful gathered in this arena found themselves staring not at curiosity, but at a reminder. The human had shown them that strength did not come only from advanced alloys, glowing blades, or technology, so refined it gleamed like magic. It came from patience, from will, from a mind that could calculate, adapt, and endure. They saw it now, reflected in the calm figure who stood unbowed with nothing but rust and wood in his hands. The body of the champion was lifted away, but the silence lingered. No chant rose to replace it, no triumphant cry of victory for the fallen warrior's legacy. The crowd remained seated, their confidence fractured, their laughter extinguished. The human's presence alone filled the void, quiet yet commanding, like the last sound of a bell that refuses to fade. And then, as the dust settled over the blood-stained sand, the human turned his back on the crowd. He did not bow, did not raise his weapon in celebration. He walked toward the gate he had entered, stepped steady, the rifle resting across his shoulder like a trusted companion. Every movement declared a truth that words could not contain. Humanity did not need their approval. Humanity had just announced itself to the stars. Behind him, whispers began to spread, hushed and urgent, but carrying through every tier of the arena. Some voices were filled with fear, others with curiosity, a few with something approaching respect. The rusted rifle had spoken, and in its echo lay the certainty that the galaxy had witnessed the impossible. What had been dismissed as a relic was now a question that gnawed at every mind present. If such a weapon, so crude and forgotten, could topple their champion, what else did these humans hide behind their quiet eyes and steady hands? The human vanished through the shadowed gate, leaving the elites with nothing but questions. The arena floor remained stained with blood and silence, the weight of a single bullet hanging over every seat. The spectacle was over, but the story had only just begun, and none among the elites could laugh any longer. The chamber behind the arena was cold and dim, lit only by pale strips of artificial light. The human walked with the same steady rhythm he had carried into battle, the rifle resting across his shoulder as though it weighed nothing. Dust and blood still clung to the weapon stock, but he did not wipe it clean. Instead, he held it with reverence, as though the weapon itself had earned its rest. His steps echoed in the silence, and though he was alone, he could feel the weight of thousands of eyes lingering on him from beyond the walls. The elites remained stunned in their seats, long after the champion's body had been removed. Arguments broke out among them in frantic waves, voices sharp with disbelief and outrage. Some demanded inquiries into sabotage, others whispered of forgotten sciences, and a few admitted the truth they least wanted to speak. The champion had fallen to nothing more than a bullet. What unsettled them most was not the death itself, but the way it had happened, swift, precise, undeniable. Technology had failed against will, and in that failure, their carefully built illusion of superiority cracked. A crystalline noble, his facets glimmering with anger, slammed a fist against the railing. Impossible. A projectile cannot penetrate armor reinforced at the molecular level. Yet his words rang hollow, even to his own kin. Across the stands, a reptilian General Hislow conflicted between fury and reluctant admiration. Impossible or not, he said, the human did it. You saw it. We all saw it. That truth spread like wildfire. Messengers carried it beyond the arena, transmitting it across worlds and into the ears of rulers who had long dismissed Earth as a nuisance. News anchors would play the sound of the shot again and again, dissecting the instant a Titan fell. Scholars would pore over recordings, searching for hidden explanations, and soldiers, scattered across starfleets and garrisons, would whisper about the man with the rusted rifle and wonder what kind of people birthed him. Inside the chamber, the human placed a rifle gently on a metal bench. He sat beside it, his expression unchanged, though the faintest trace of weariness shadowed his features. His hands were steady, but his eyes lingered on the floor for a long moment, as though remembering places and battles far from this alien world. To him, this was not a miracle. It was another fight, no different than those fought by generations before him. He had carried not only a weapon into the arena, but the memory of countless unnamed soldiers who had stood their ground with less than this. Beyond the chamber doors, heavy footsteps echoed. Officials of the arena, representatives of the elites. They came with their jeweled robes and their voices sharpened by politics, their expressions masks of restraint. They demanded explanations, demanded to know what trick had been used, how the rifle could perform such an impossible feat. The human only met their questions with silence, letting their frustration mount. Finally, when one accused him outright of fraud, he spoke. There was no trick, he said, voice low but carrying. You put your faith in machines. I put mine in discipline. That's the difference. His words were plain, almost dismissive, but the weight behind them silenced the room. The officials departed, some bristling with fury, others whispering in uneasy tones. Yet no one dared challenge him further. The image of the champion's fall still burned too vividly in their minds. As they left, the human gathered his rifle once more, slinging it over his shoulder with the ease of a man who had walked this path 1,000 times before. He did not seek to justify himself. He did not need to. The shot had spoken for him. Outside, the galaxy stirred. In the halls of power, strategies began to shift. Some empires, shaken to their core, saw humanity as a threat that must be contained before it grew. Others, impressed despite themselves, began to whisper alliances of new blood that could reshape the balance of power. For centuries, the elites had mocked Earth as a world of relics. Now they spoke its name with caution, even respect. Among soldiers, the story spread fastest. Warriors of a dozen species who had been raised to worship technology found themselves unsettled. If one man with a rusted rifle could bring down a champion, what could an army of such men achieve? Across barracks and training fields, they whispered the new phrase as though it were legend already written. One shot, one kill. The human, unaware or perhaps uncaring of the ripples he had set in motion, stepped out into the twilight of the barren world. The arena loomed behind him, its towering walls still echoing with silence. He paused for a moment, breathing the dry air, then began the long walk toward a transport that would take him away. Every step left a faint print in the sand, a trail the wind would soon erase. Yet the mark he had left upon the galaxy would not fade so easily. He did not smile, nor did he celebrate. To him, the battle was finished, and nothing more needed to be said. The rifle across his shoulder was quiet now, but it had spoken once, and that was enough. Perhaps tomorrow, another challenge would rise. Perhaps the elites would try again with another champion, armed with newer weapons and greater strength. But he would meet them the same way, calm, steady, unshaken, for that was what humanity was. Behind him, the stars began to pierce the sky, countless points of light stretching across the void. Out there, empires schemed and rulers panicked, each deciding what to make of Earth's sudden announcement. Some would underestimate again. Others would prepare for war. But all of them would remember the silence that followed a single gunshot and the man who had carried a rusted rifle into the heart of their pride. He walked into the night without looking back, leaving the galaxy to wrestle with the truth. Humanity had come late to the stars, mocked and dismissed, yet in one shot they had claimed their place among the powers that ruled. The elites would never laugh so freely again, and somewhere beyond the horizon, the echo of that single bullet carried on, promising that this was only the beginning.